Lila sat on the worn wooden steps of the small porch, hugging her knees tightly to her chest. The cold wind bit at her cheeks, and she shivered. Not just because of the chill, but because of the emptiness she felt inside. The house behind her, which should have been a place of comfort, felt like a prison. Her stepmother's voice could be heard inside, sharp and unforgiving, demanding that Lila finish chores that seemed impossible to complete in one day. The sound of dishes clattering, doors slamming, and her own heart racing made her feel trapped. As if the walls of the house were closing in around her. It had been months since her father passed away, and life had taken a harsh turn. Her stepmother seemed to see Lila not as a child who had lost her father, but as an inconvenience. Every morning began with cold instructions, sharp words, and the endless list of chores. Breakfast was a rushed affair if she got one at all, often just leftovers or scraps that were hastily thrown together. The stepmother's gaze was never soft, her voice never gentle. Lila had learned to move quietly, to keep her head down, and to disappear as much as possible, but somehow, no matter how careful she was, she always seemed to draw criticism. Some days were worse than others. Today had been one of the worst. She had accidentally spilled water while washing the kitchen floor, and her stepmother's reaction had been immediate and harsh. Lila had barely had time to apologize before the shouting started, words that cut deeper than any physical pain. "You are so careless. Why can't you do anything right?" she had yelled. Lila's hands had shaken as she finished the cleaning, her eyes stinging with tears that she refused to let fall in front of her stepmother. She had learned early on that showing weakness was dangerous. Tears meant punishment, meant more ridicule, meant even more chores. So she ran. She ran to the porch, away from the angry voice, and let herself feel a fraction of the sadness she had kept bottled up. She closed her eyes, imagining a world where she could be safe, where someone would understand her pain, a world where she could laugh freely, without fear. Lila's mind wandered to memories of her father, of the warmth he had brought into their home, of his gentle words and kind smile. Those memories were like a small flame in the darkness, something she clung to when the cold of her stepmother's cruelty seemed unbearable. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that made her feel invisible, which was a feeling she was strangely used to. She watched as a few kids played down the street, their laughter carrying on the wind. For a moment, Lila felt a pang of longing, wishing she could join them, wishing someone would see her, anyone, and know that she was more than the chores she did or the mistakes she made. But she didn't dare approach them. She had learned that hope often led to disappointment. Disappointment led to more pain. As the afternoon stretched on, Lila stayed hidden on the porch, her small body curled up against the cold. She thought about what it would be like if someone noticed her, if someone cared enough to ask if she was okay. She had read stories in books where kindness came out of nowhere, where strangers became heroes, but real life had not been so kind. The stepmother's harshness was her reality, and it seemed there was no escape. Yet a tiny part of her refused to give up hope. That part whispered that maybe, just maybe, someone would see the tears she kept hidden and offer her a hand to hold. Her stomach growled softly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten much that day. Breakfast had been rushed, lunch had been skipped, and dinner would likely be cold and uninviting. Lila rubbed her stomach and wished for something warm, something comforting. She remembered the times her father had tucked her in, reading her stories and bringing her small treats just to see her smile. Those memories were bittersweet, a reminder of the love she had lost, but also a reason to keep believing that life could offer moments of kindness again. Hours passed, and the sky turned a dull gray as evening approached. Lila's stepmother had gone out for a while, leaving the house silent. Lila peeked inside, hoping no one would notice her absence from the chores, hoping for a small window of freedom. She tiptoed back inside, cleaning dishes quietly, folding laundry, trying to avoid making any noise. The house felt bigger than ever, echoing with the absence of warmth and presence. She paused for a moment, leaning against the wall, listening to the creaks and groans of the old house. It felt alive in a way, as if it too was sympathetic to her struggles. Holding the memories of better times within its walls, the evening grew colder, and Lila finally returned to the porch, wrapping her arms around herself once more. Tears began to fall, despite her best efforts to hold them back. They ran down her cheeks silently, soaking the fabric of her worn sweater. She didn't care who saw her now. The pain she had kept hidden for so long needed to be released, if only for a few moments. She cried for the meals she had missed, for the words that cut her deeply, for the father she had lost, and for the stepmother who seemed incapable of love as darkness settled in. Lila's thoughts drifted to the future, to what it might hold. She didn't know how she would escape her current life, or if she ever would, but she held on to a fragile hope. She imagined a life where kindness replaced cruelty, where smiles were given freely, and where she could feel safe in her own home. The night was quiet, but in that quiet, Lila whispered her hopes into the wind, as if sharing them with the universe, believing, however faintly, that someone, somewhere, might hear them. Lila stayed on the porch long after the sun had set, her tears slowly drying as she gazed at the dark sky above. The stars began to peek through, tiny points of light in the vastness, and she imagined each one as a promise that life could change. She thought about the day she might leave this house behind, about the people who could care for her, and about the possibility that happiness wasn't forever out of reach. The night wrapped around her like a blanket, cold but comforting in its own way, holding her until sleep finally took her into a world where her tears could be replaced by dreams of hope. Lila wandered down the quiet streets, near her home, trying to escape the suffocating atmosphere that had become her life. Her feet ached from walking, and her stomach reminded her gently that she had eaten very little all day. She found herself in a small park, the kind where a few trees cast long shadows, and the benches were worn from years of use. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small world of freedom compared to the walls of her home. She sat on one of the benches, hugging herself as she watched a few children play in the distance. Their laughter was a strange mixture of joy and pain for her to hear. Joy because it reminded her of the happiness she had once felt, and pain because it reminded her of what she had lost. She felt invisible and small, like a shadow that no one noticed. Tears started to form again, quietly rolling down her cheeks, and for once, she didn't try to hide them. She didn't care if anyone saw. She had kept so much pain inside that it needed an escape. Lila tried to focus on something else. Anything that would make her forget the harsh words and cold treatment she had faced at home. She looked at the trees swaying gently in the breeze, the leaves rustling as if they were whispering stories to each other. A bird chirped nearby, hopping from branch to branch, and she imagined it as a tiny messenger of hope, carrying a message that life could still be kind. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe deeply, trying to imagine a life that was kinder, where she didn't feel like a burden or a mistake. Just then, a man appeared in the park, quietly walking along the path. He seemed different from anyone Lila had ever seen. There was a calmness in the way he moved, a softness in his eyes and an air of kindness that made her uneasy, but also curious. He noticed Lila sitting alone, her small frame curled up on the bench, and he stopped for a moment. He didn't rush her, didn't ask anything immediately. He just stood there, watching quietly, as if he could sense the pain that clung to her like a shadow. Lila felt his gaze and instinctively pulled her knees closer, trying to make herself even smaller. She was used to being noticed in the wrong ways, for the wrong reasons, and this attention made her nervous. But there was something different about this man. There was no judgment in his eyes, no anger or impatience. He simply looked at her with a softness that made her heart ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. After a few moments, he took a slow step forward and asked in a gentle voice, "Are you okay? You look like you could use someone to talk to." Lila was startled. She wasn't used to people asking about her feelings or offering help. She opened her mouth to say something, but found the words stuck in her throat. Tears blurred her vision as she shook her head slightly. Unable to speak, the man nodded slowly, not pushing her, not judging. "It's okay. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. I just want you to know that it's all right to feel what you're feeling." His words were like a small spark in the darkness. Lila had been carrying so much pain, so many silent cries, and for someone to simply acknowledge her feelings without expecting anything in return was almost too much to comprehend. She felt the lump in her throat begin to loosen, and a few words finally escaped her lips, quiet and hesitant. I don't have anyone." The man sat down on the bench a little distance from her, careful to give her space. "Sometimes it feels that way, doesn't it? Like no one sees you, like no one cares. But there are people who notice, even if it doesn't always feel that way." Leela listened, feeling the sincerity in his voice. She had grown up believing that kindness was rare, that people were quick to judge and slow to help. But this man was different. He didn't make her feel small. He didn't make her feel ashamed of her tears. Instead, he made her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was someone in the world who could understand her pain. She began to talk slowly, hesitantly, about the harshness of her stepmother, the loneliness she felt after her father's death, and the endless chores that left her exhausted and unseen. The man listened quietly, nodding occasionally, never interrupting, never dismissing her words. It was the first time in a long time that Lila felt like someone truly cared about what she was experiencing. After a while, he asked gently, "Would you like to come with me somewhere safe? Just for a little while until you feel better." Lila hesitated. She had learned to be cautious, to not trust strangers, and to believe that offers of help often came with strings attached. But something in the man's eyes, in the calmness of his presence, made her want to believe. She nodded slowly, unsure but willing to take a chance. He smiled softly, a smile that carried warmth and reassurance. "That's all I ask. No pressure, no expectations. Just a safe place to sit and rest." As they walked together, Leela felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The world outside her home had always felt uncertain, dangerous even. But this man's presence made her feel a little lighter, a little braver. She glanced up at him occasionally, noticing the kindness in the way he walked, the care in the way he spoke. She didn't know who he was or why he cared, but she felt a flicker of trust growing in her heart. They arrived at a small cafe that felt welcoming and warm. The kind of place where the smell of fresh bread and coffee wrapped around you like a hug. The man guided her to a corner table, and they sat down. He ordered a small meal for her, something simple but nourishing, and watched as she ate quietly, noticing the way she savored each bite as if it were a luxury she hadn't had in years. They spoke gently. About small things, at first the weather, the park, the little joys that could be found even in hard times. Lila felt herself relax, feeling a sense of normalcy she hadn't experienced in a long while. She realized that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, to be treated with kindness without conditions or judgments. Her voice grew stronger as she shared small stories, memories of her father. Moments of hope she had clung to, even in the darkest times. The man listened patiently, occasionally offering quiet encouragement, never pushing, never questioning. It was the first time Leela had felt truly heard in a long time, and it was both comforting and overwhelming. She realized how starved she had been for genuine attention, for someone to care about her as a person rather than as a burden or a mistake. Hours passed, and the cafe grew quieter as the evening approached. Leela felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. She didn't want to leave the warmth and safety of this new space, but she also knew she couldn't stay forever. The man noticed her hesitation and spoke softly. "You don't have to make any decisions now. Take your time. I'll make sure you're safe, no matter what." Those words carried a weight she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, she felt like someone genuinely cared about her well-being, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She realized that maybe, just maybe, life could offer moments of kindness and hope, even in the midst of hardship. As they left the cafe, the man walked beside her quietly, offering a comforting presence. Lila didn't know where this path would lead, but she felt a small spark of hope flickering inside her. She realized that sometimes, a single act of kindness, a single moment of understanding, could change the course of a life. And for the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, her life could change for the better after that day in the park and the cafe. Lila's life began to shift in ways she had never imagined. The man, who had introduced himself simply as someone who cared about people, did not force her into anything. Instead, He showed her a gentle kindness that slowly began to heal the small wounded parts of her heart. He visited her occasionally, bringing small gifts, books, or treats, each one carefully chosen to make her feel valued and seen. At first, Lila felt awkward receiving attention, as if kindness was foreign and uncomfortable, but over time, she learned to accept it without fear or suspicion. One afternoon, he arrived with an idea. He suggested that Lila come with him to a safe place, a home where she could rest, study, and live without fear of cruelty. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Lila's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had spent her life living under strict rules, under the constant scrutiny of a stepmother who seemed to find pleasure in controlling her. The thought of leaving that behind was thrilling, but also terrifying. She wasn't used to trust, and yet, something inside her told her that this was different. Lila hesitated at the doorway of her home, glancing back at the dark interior where shadows seemed to move with the weight of her memories. Her stepmother was not there at the moment, giving her a rare moment of freedom. She took a deep breath, feeling the chill of the wind against her skin, and stepped forward. The man waited patiently, a calm presence beside her, and together they walked to a car that would take her to a new life. The drive was quiet, filled with the kind of silence that is comfortable. The kind that allows someone to simply be without the need to explain or justify themselves. They arrived at a large, welcoming house surrounded by greenery. It was unlike the cramped, oppressive space she had known. The walls were warm, the rooms bright, and the air carried a sense of calm. Lila's eyes widened as she stepped inside, taking in the sights and sounds. She felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, a small weight lifting from her chest. She was offered a room, cozy and simple, with a window that let in sunlight and a view of the garden outside. For the first time in years, she felt that she had a space of her own, a place where she could belong. The man introduced her to the staff and the caretakers who would be part of her new life. Each person greeted her with warmth and kindness, their smiles genuine, their attention patient and understanding. Lila was overwhelmed, but in a quiet, almost shy way, she began to respond. She realized that she had never experienced this kind of acceptance before, people who treated her not as a burden or a mistake, but as a person with feelings, thoughts, and dreams. Days passed, and Lila began to settle into this new life. She attended school nearby, where she found the teachers kind and encouraging. They noticed her curiosity, her intelligence, and her quiet strength, and they nurtured it carefully. She learned to read and write more fluently, to express herself in ways she had been too afraid to before. The man continued to check on her, always gentle, always present, never imposing, allowing her to grow at her own pace. He encouraged her to explore her interests, to find what made her heart light, and slowly, she began to remember what it felt like to be happy without fear. One afternoon, Lila was in the garden, tending to the flowers with a small caretaker who guided her gently. She realized how much she enjoyed the simple act of nurturing something alive. Each plant she tended seemed to respond to her care, growing stronger, blooming brighter. It was a small, yet profound reminder that kindness and attention could create life and beauty. She began to understand that her own life could flourish in a similar way if given care and patience, despite the safety and comfort of her new environment. Shadows of her past sometimes crept in. Memories of harsh words, empty meals, and long days filled with chores haunted her. Some nights she would wake up crying silently, afraid of her stepmother, or unsure of her own place in the world. But each time, the man or one of the caretakers would be there, offering quiet reassurance, listening without judgment, letting her know that her feelings were valid and that she was not alone. Gradually, these shadows lost their power over her. Becoming memories rather than ongoing pain, Lila began to dream again, to imagine a future where she could pursue her passions, make friends, and perhaps one day help others who had suffered as she had. The concept of hope was no longer a distant idea. It became a part of her daily life. She started to write in a journal, expressing thoughts she had never shared, drawing sketches of things that inspired her, and recording her feelings openly. Through this, she found her voice and her confidence. realizing that her past did not define her and that she had the power to shape her own life. As the months went by, the bond between Lila and the man grew stronger, not in a way that demanded loyalty or obedience, but in a mutual understanding and trust. He guided her with wisdom, offering gentle advice, listening to her fears and dreams, and celebrating her small victories. He became a mentor, a protector, and in some ways a family she had lost. She began to understand that life could hold both kindness and security, and that her tears could now be met with comfort rather than cruelty. One day, as they walked through the garden, he asked her gently, "Do you ever think about what you want for yourself?" Lila paused, thinking about her future, something she had rarely allowed herself to imagine. "I want to be safe, and I want to learn," she said slowly, her voice quiet but firm. "I want to know that I can be happy without being afraid." He nodded, smiling softly. "You deserve that and so much more. You have the strength to make your life what you want it to be, and I'll help you along the way. You're not alone anymore." Those words settled deep within her, planting seeds of courage and self-belief. Lila began to take steps toward independence, learning practical skills, building friendships, and exploring the world beyond the house and garden. The once small and frightened girl was slowly transforming into someone who could face challenges with resilience, someone who understood that the kindness she had been shown was not a rare miracle, but a reflection of the possibility inherent in every human heart. Through all of this, the man remained a steady presence, never forcing, never pushing, always guiding gently. Lila began to understand that her life was no longer dictated by fear or cruelty, and that she had the right to claim happiness and security. Her laughter, once rare and hesitant, began to fill the rooms of the house. She discovered that joy could coexist with her past, that it was possible to carry memories of pain and still build a life of hope. And for the first time, Lila felt that she truly belonged somewhere, that someone cared for her not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Her journey had only just begun, but she was no longer walking it alone. Even though Lila's life had changed for the better, she still carried memories of the past that were hard to shake. Some nights, the words of her stepmother echoed in her mind, sharp and cruel, reminding her of the pain she had endured. She had grown stronger and more confident, but those shadows still lingered, whispering fears she struggled to ignore. The man who had become her guardian noticed this and always offered gentle guidance, encouraging her to face her fears rather than hide from them. One afternoon, he suggested they take a trip to her old neighborhood, a place that held both painful memories and the possibility of closure. Lila hesitated at first, unsure if she could face the streets and the house that had felt like a prison for so long. But something inside her stirred a desire to confront the past, to take control of her story, and to finally step out from the shadow of fear. With careful steps, she agreed, and they set off together. Walking down familiar streets, Lila felt a mix of emotions. The houses looked smaller than she remembered, the streets quieter, yet every corner seemed to carry the weight of old memories. She felt the pang of fear as they approached the house where her stepmother lived. But she also felt a sense of determination growing within her. She realized that she was no longer the same frightened girl who had fled from her home months ago. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Standing in front of the house, Lila took a deep breath. The man beside her offered a reassuring smile, silently telling her that she didn't have to face this alone. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The stepmother answered, surprised, and immediately defensive when she saw Lila standing there. Her eyes narrowed, and her voice carried the same sharpness Lila had known for years. For a moment, Lila felt the old fear rising, threatening to consume her. But she steadied herself, drawing on the strength she had built over the past months. She spoke clearly and calmly, recounting the cruelty she had endured. Not with anger or yelling, but with honesty and courage. She described the long hours of chores, the constant belittling, the neglect, the way she'd been made to feel invisible and unworthy. She told her stepmother how much it had hurt and how it had shaped her life. The stepmother reacted with surprise, perhaps even guilt, but mostly with defensiveness. She tried to interrupt, to dismiss Lila's words, but Lila held her ground. She was no longer the girl who could be silenced by harsh words. She had learned to value her own feelings and her own voice. She told her stepmother that she had found a place of safety and kindness, that she had people who cared for her, and that she no longer needed to be afraid of cruelty. As the conversation continued, the stepmother's expression softened slightly. Though it was mixed with confusion and perhaps a trace of regret, Lila realized that this moment wasn't about seeking revenge or punishment. It was about reclaiming her own life and asserting her right to be treated with respect and dignity. She walked away with her head held high, feeling a sense of closure she had never imagined possible. The stepmother remained at the doorway, silent, while Lila and the man walked back to the car. Lila felt a strange sense of liberation, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Returning to her safe home, Lila reflected on the experience. She realized that facing the past, even in small steps, was an important part of healing. She had confronted fear with courage, and in doing so, had reclaimed a piece of herself that had been buried under years of pain. The man beside her noticed her thoughtful expression and offered quiet encouragement, reminding her that growth often comes from facing the parts of life we wish we could ignore. In the following days, Lila began to explore her talents and interests more fully. She joined a local art class, discovering a love for painting that allowed her to express emotions she had previously kept hidden. She also started volunteering at a community center, helping children who faced challenges similar to those she had endured. These experiences reinforced her sense of purpose and belonging, and she began to see how her pain could be transformed into empathy and support for others. Through her efforts, Lila formed new friendships that brought joy and companionship into her life. She learned to trust people gradually, building connections based on mutual respect and kindness. Her confidence grew as she realized that she could contribute meaningfully to the lives of others, and that her past did not define her future. Each day, she became more aware of her own strength and resilience, discovering the depth of courage that had always existed within her. The man remained a guiding presence, offering advice and support without imposing control. He encouraged her to take small steps toward independence, teaching her practical skills, decision-making, and self-reliance. Lila began to see herself as capable and empowered, able to navigate the world with confidence. She learned that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a way to build connections and ensure her own well-being. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, the man asked gently, "How do you feel about everything you've been through?" Lila thought for a moment, watching the colors of the sky deepen into shades of pink and orange. "It still hurts sometimes," she admitted, "but I feel stronger now. I've learned that I don't have to be afraid anymore and that I can face my past without letting it control me." The man nodded, a warm smile on his face. "That's exactly it. Your past is a part of you, but it doesn't define you. You have the power to create your own story, filled with hope, kindness, and strength." Lila felt a sense of peace settle over her, a calm that came from knowing she had faced her fears and emerged stronger. She realized that healing was a journey, not a destination, and that each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. She had learned to stand up for herself, to value her own feelings, and to trust in the kindness of others. Her laughter began to return, soft at first, then growing more genuine, filling the spaces around her with warmth and light. As days turned into weeks, Lila continued to grow, embracing new experiences and challenges with courage and determination. She discovered the joy of learning, the satisfaction of helping others, and the beauty of forming meaningful connections. Each moment reinforced the understanding that life could hold both hardship and joy, and that resilience and kindness could transform even the darkest experiences. Through it all, the man remained by her side, not as a crutch, but as a guiding presence, showing her the possibilities that existed in a world filled with care and compassion. Lila began to see herself as a person worthy of love, respect, and happiness. She realized that her tears, once a symbol of fear and pain, had become a source of strength, shaping her into someone who could face the world with courage and hope. The journey was far from over, but Leela knew she was ready to continue it. No longer defined by the cruelty she had endured, but empowered by the kindness and support that had changed her. Life forever. Lila's life had transformed in ways she had never thought possible. The girl who once sat alone on cold wooden steps, hiding her tears from a world that seemed cruel and uncaring, was now stepping confidently into a life filled with possibility and hope. Each morning, she woke with a sense of purpose, eager to learn, to explore, and to experience the joys that had once seemed beyond her reach. The man who had guided her, quietly, patiently, remained by her side. Offering support without imposing his will, he encouraged her to follow her heart, to pursue her dreams, and to discover her own strengths. Lila began to see herself not as a victim of her past, but as someone capable of shaping her future. She took pride in small accomplishments, from mastering new skills to helping others. In each success built her confidence, reinforcing the belief that she was worthy of happiness and love. She spent her days attending school and engaging in activities that sparked her curiosity and creativity. Art became a refuge, a way to express emotions that had once been trapped inside her. Her paintings reflected both the pain she had endured and the hope that now colored her life. She discovered that through art, she could communicate her experiences, touch others, and even inspire those who had faced similar hardships. In addition to art, Lila found joy in volunteering at a local community center. She worked with children who faced challenges like her own, offering guidance, companionship, and empathy. The joy she saw in their eyes mirrored the hope she had discovered within herself. She realized that her past, while painful, had given her a unique perspective and the ability to bring comfort to others. Each act of kindness strengthened her sense of purpose, and she began to see how her journey could help others find light in their own darkness. Lila also began to build friendships that were based on trust, understanding, and shared interests. She learned the value of companionship, of laughter shared freely, and of being accepted for who she was, not for what she could do or how she had been treated. These relationships became a source of joy and support, reminding her that she was not alone in the world and that genuine connections were possible. One day, she received an unexpected invitation from her stepmother. Lila approached the meeting with caution, unsure of what to expect. She had grown stronger and more confident, but the past still held echoes of pain. When they met, the stepmother appeared different, less harsh, more uncertain, as if the cruelty of the past had been tempered by reflection or perhaps guilt. Lila listened quietly as her stepmother spoke, acknowledging the wrongs and expressing a tentative desire to make amends. Lila realized that forgiveness was not about forgetting or condoning the past, but about freeing herself from the hold it had over her. She responded calmly, expressing her feelings honestly and establishing boundaries that protected her well-being. This encounter, though difficult, reinforced Lila's sense of empowerment. She understood that she could engage with the past without being consumed by it, and that her strength lay in choosing how to respond. She walked away with a sense of clarity and peace, knowing that she had faced her fears and emerged resilient. As Lila continued to grow, she embraced opportunities that expanded her horizons. She traveled to new places, explored nature, and engaged in experiences that enriched her understanding of the world. Each adventure brought new lessons, new friendships, and a deepening sense of self-awareness. She discovered that life was not only about overcoming challenges, but also about embracing joy, curiosity, and discovery. Throughout this journey, the man remained a steady presence, offering guidance, wisdom, and encouragement. He never overshadowed her achievements, but celebrated them alongside her, reminding her that success was not only about accomplishments, but also about growth, resilience, and the ability to make positive choices. Lila came to see him as a mentor, a guardian, and a trusted friend whose belief in her had helped her unlock her own potential. With time, Lila also began to focus on her education and future aspirations. She studied diligently, exploring subjects that interested her and preparing for a life where she could contribute meaningfully to society. She developed goals and plans, understanding that her past did not limit her, but rather provided motivation to create a life defined by her own choices and values. She envisioned a future where she could inspire others, advocate for kindness, and demonstrate the power of resilience. The transformation within Leela was profound. She moved through life with confidence, compassion, and a sense of purpose. Her laughter, once rare and hesitant, became a frequent companion, filling the spaces around her with warmth. She formed connections with people who respected and valued her, and she cultivated a life that balanced learning, creativity, service, and personal fulfillment. Each day was an opportunity to grow, to explore, and to experience joy in ways she had never thought possible. Reflecting on her journey, Leela understood that the tears she had once shed were not a symbol of weakness, but of resilience. They had marked the beginning of a transformation, a journey from fear and pain to hope and empowerment. She realized that while life could be challenging and unfair, it could also be filled with moments of kindness, connection, and beauty. The choices she made, the courage she demonstrated, and the kindness she embraced had shaped her into someone strong, compassionate, and capable. One evening, as she watched the sunset from her favorite spot in the garden, Leela felt a deep sense of gratitude. She thought about the man who had quietly changed her life, the caregivers and friends who had supported her, and the inner strength she had discovered. She understood that her life was no longer defined by the cruelty of the past, but by the hope, kindness, and courage that guided her present and future. She whispered a quiet promise to herself to continue this journey, to embrace every opportunity for growth, and to share her story and her strength with others who might need it. As the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle above, Leela felt a sense of peace and possibility. She had faced the past, embraced the present, and looked forward to the future with confidence and hope. The girl who had once been invisible, alone, and afraid was now a young woman empowered, resilient, and full of potential. Her tears had become a source of strength, her experiences a foundation for compassion, and her journey a testament to the transformative power of kindness, support, and courage. Leela knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had the tools, the support, and the inner strength to navigate them. Her story was no longer one of suffering alone, but of hope, resilience, and the enduring human capacity to overcome and thrive. Years had passed since Leela had first stepped into the safe and welcoming home that had changed her life. The girl who once trembled at harsh words and hid her tears from the world had grown into a young woman of remarkable strength and resilience. Life had not been without challenges, but she had learned to face them with courage, supported by the kindness and guidance of the man who had first noticed her in the park and by the community that had embraced her. Leela's days were now filled with purpose. She had continued her education with determination, discovering a love for learning that had been suppressed by years of fear and neglect. Her favorite subjects were history and literature, where she could explore the stories of people who had faced adversity and found ways to thrive. These lessons inspired her, reminding her that strength and courage could take many forms, and that the human spirit could endure even the harshest trials. Beyond her studies, Leela devoted time to helping others. She became involved in community programs that supported children facing difficult circumstances. Using her own experiences to connect with them on a deeper level, her empathy and understanding made her a comforting presence, someone who could offer guidance without judgment, encouragement without condescension. The children she helped began to see her as a role model, a living example of what resilience and support could achieve. Art remained an essential part of Leela's life. Her paintings had grown more expressive, capturing not just the beauty of nature or the quiet moments of her surroundings, but also the depth of human emotion. She held small exhibitions in the local community, where her work was appreciated not just for its technical skill, but for the story it told, the story of a life transformed through kindness, courage, and perseverance. People who viewed her art often felt inspired, reminded that hope could emerge even from the darkest circumstances. Leela also nurtured strong friendships, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. These relationships brought laughter and companionship into her life, allowing her to experience joy in a way that had been rare during her childhood. She learned the importance of surrounding herself with people who uplifted her, who encouraged her growth, and who celebrated her successes alongside her. Each connection strengthened her sense of belonging and reinforced the belief that she was worthy of love and care. Despite the happiness she had found, Lila never forgot the lessons of her past. She remained aware of the fragility of trust and the importance of setting boundaries. The man who had guided her from the beginning continued to offer wisdom, reminding her that strength included knowing when to stand firm and when to ask for help. His mentorship provided stability, steady hand guiding her as she navigated the complexities of growing up and becoming independent. One day, Lila decided to return to the park where she had first met the man who changed her life. She walked through the familiar paths, now seeing them through the eyes of someone who had experienced both pain and healing. She sat on the same bench, her gaze sweeping over the area where children played, laughter filling the air. She remembered the tears she had shed there, the fear she had carried, and the hope that had begun to flicker within her when someone had finally noticed her as she sat. She felt a sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken. She thought about the people who had supported her, the experiences that had shaped her, and the strength she had discovered within herself. Lila realized that life was a tapestry of moments, some painful, some joyful, some transformative, and that every experience had contributed to the person she had become. In the following weeks, Lila focused on expanding her impact. She initiated workshops at schools and community centers, teaching children how to express themselves through art and writing. She encouraged them to share their stories, to find their voice, and to believe in their potential. Her workshops were met with enthusiasm, and the children began to see her not just as a teacher, but as someone who understood their struggles and could guide them toward hope and confidence. Lila also began mentoring young women who had experienced hardship, sharing her story with honesty and compassion. She emphasized the importance of resilience, self-respect, and the power of seeking help when needed. Through these efforts, she created a network of support that extended beyond her immediate community, offering guidance and encouragement to those who might otherwise feel alone and powerless. Her relationship with the man who had guided her remained central to her life. He continued to offer advice and support, but now as a trusted friend and advisor rather than a protector. Lila valued his presence not because she needed him to shield her from the world, but because he had helped her recognize her own strength and the value of the life she had built. Together they reflected on her growth, the challenges she had overcome, and the ways in which she had transformed her pain into purpose. Through all of this, Lila maintained a sense of balance and mindfulness. She spent time in nature, meditating on her experiences, appreciating the beauty of small moments, and nurturing her mental and emotional well-being. She had learned that self-care was not a luxury, but a necessity, and that maintaining her own health and happiness allowed her to support others more effectively. Lila also discovered the joy of new experiences. She traveled to places she had once only imagined, exploring cultures, landscapes, and communities that broadened her understanding of the world. Each journey brought fresh perspectives, deepened her empathy, and strengthened her ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds. She realized that her life, once constrained by fear and neglect, was now open to possibilities limited only by her imagination and courage. As she continued to grow, Lila embraced the idea of giving back on a larger scale. She collaborated with organizations that focused on child welfare, its education, and mental health, contributing her insights, skills, and experiences to make a tangible difference. Her story inspired others to act, creating a ripple effect of kindness, empathy, and support that extended far beyond her immediate circle. One evening, as Lila reflected on her journey, she realized how far she had come. The girl who once hid behind walls of fear and sadness had become a young woman capable of leading, inspiring, and nurturing others. She understood that her tears, once a sign of helplessness, had been the seeds of resilience, empathy, and transformation. She had learned that life's hardships could be met with courage, That kindness could change the trajectory of a life. And that hope could flourish even in the most unexpected places. With a deep sense of gratitude and determination, Lila made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to grow, to learn, and to support others. She would embrace every opportunity to create positive change, using her experiences to guide and uplift those who needed it most. She knew that challenges would arise, but she also knew that she possessed the strength, wisdom, and resilience to face them. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, Lila felt a profound sense of peace. She had transformed her life from one of fear and loneliness to one of purpose, connection, and hope. Her journey was a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and human connection. And as she looked toward the future, she felt ready to continue her journey, embracing the unknown with confidence, grace, and an unwavering belief in the potential for goodness in the world.